I'm Jim Carney.
And I'm Linda Hirsch.
And this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education.
With so much emphasis on technology and economics, is there a place for the humanities in education today? What can the humanities offer students? Or are they irrelevant in a fast-paced, complex digital world? Today, I'm joined by Columbia University's Dr. Roosevelt Montas to examine the place of humanistic learning in education.
Later in the show, I'll visit with two professors at Hostos Community College who just completed a year-long faculty development project designed to promote the humanities in general education.
My guest today is Dr. Roosevelt Montas, the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and Director of the Center for the Core Curriculum at Columbia University. Welcome, Dr. Montas.
My pleasure to be here.
In a world focused on technology, what is the place of the humanities in education today? Or as we like to say, whither goeth the humanities?
I think that the fact that we live in what's been characterized as an information age, driven by technology, the pace of change, the pace and amount of information, complexity of information that hits us every day increase exponentially. I think that makes the humanities all the more relevant. Part of what we work at the humanities is precisely ways of contextualizing and bringing into the framework of the human experience all of these changes, the variety, complexity of our daily interactions. How do we think about them in a humanist framework? That is, how do those things relate to the question, what does it mean to be human? And I think the current revolutions in technology and in the pace of social and political change makes the humanities and make that kind of training all the more relevant.
What is the history of the humanities? When we talk about the humanities, what specifically are we talking about? You raised one question, what does it mean to be human?
Yeah.
What is the history and the meaning of the humanities?
The humanities, it's kind of the academic manifestation of a very long tradition of humanist tradition, that is a tradition of inquiry that takes the achievements of knowledge, our capacities, our rational capacities to think through things, to solve problems, to understand the world, takes those rational capacities and brings them into the human world, brings them into the framework of the basic question, what does it mean to be human? And the humanities is a way of systematizing the study of knowledge, the study of what we know, down to this question, down to how does it help us understand what it means to be human, to have consciousness?
When did the study of the humanities start? How far back are we looking when we look at the humanities?
Well, it's almost as old as the university itself. It goes deep into one. I mean, there are many arbitrary places where one can begin it, but certainly the Plato's Academy in 5th century Greece is one place where you can put the beginning of it. But it has always been very tied to the development of the university, from the great medieval universities in Europe and the humanistic tradition in the church and humanistic study. It has, of course, been transformed, and the disciplines that we have today, the humanities disciplines that we have today, are descendant, sometimes close, sometimes distant descendant from that. But it is a tradition as old as academia, a tradition as old as the systematic study of the world in an institution.
What are the disciplines today that we consider the humanities?
Sometimes it's broken a little bit different in different places, but generally the language arts, broadly speaking, that is the study of literature, whether you call it an English department or national literatures, Spanish, Portuguese, Slavic, Russian, etc. Then you also include often history and music and art. And then there are some ways of thinking about the humanities in it that makes it broader, that includes some aspects of sociology, psychology, etc.
So what do you say? I mean, is there a tension today between pragmatism and humanism, the idea of going to higher education to obtain a career, and the idea of being in education, going to college to learn, knowledge for the sake of knowledge?
Yeah. There is. Those two ideas are in tension, and that's a new tension.
That's a new tension.
That's not a
That's
new
not
tension.
A tension. Okay.
One can trace this pretty far back, and there is a famous instance of this argument between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, where they are arguing the benefit of either a liberal education or a technical trade education for newly freed blacks in the United States. And it's an instance of this argument of a way of looking at education as instrumental, as a way to gain particular skills that will have a value in the market and that are tied to making a living. There's another way of looking at education that has to do with learning how to be human, with learning how to be fully developed, with unfolding our highest capacities as human beings. And that study is somewhat disconnected from the particular pragmatic imperative to make a living. And those two roles of education, both of which are very important, both of which are necessary to have a whole education, but those are often in conflict at institutions, where some people feel that the primary focus ought to be to equip people with tangible, marketable skills. And others feel that the primary focus ought to be to teach people how to be fully human beings, to teach people how to absorb new things, how to develop certain habits of mind that will make them into effective citizens usually in a democratic society these days.
Let's say we can come down with a concrete example. I know that you've given one in the past. The humanities and the sciences, let's say, look through the world with a different lens.
Yeah.
And yet, let's take a common issue. I know in a talk that you gave once, you referred to the plague as seen through the lens of the humanities and seen through the lens of the sciences. How would they look at that issue differently, and what would each bring to that topic?
That's a very interesting example. We look at the plague, and our scientific understanding of the plague is entirely different than the ancient ones. We now know germ theory, we know the bacteria and germs that cause it, we discovered antibiotics, we know how to treat it, we know how to look for symptoms, we know how to care for people, how to cure it, essentially. So we have learned a tremendous amount about the plague and about what that means. When it comes to a humanist approach to this, we look at what has been the experience of people in a plague outbreak. And you can look at say, Thucydides' description of the plague in Athens during the Peloponnesian War, or you can look at Boccaccio's description of the plague, Black Death in Europe, or you can look in the 20th century at a rendition of this, like Albert Camus' great novel, The Plague, and try to understand the human implications. What is the human experience of encountering something like the plague, the social breakdown that happens, the human qualities that come to the fore, both the noble and the ignoble qualities that come to the fore.
Understanding how we react to that and how that affects us.
That's right. And we today, we don't have the bubonic plague anymore, but we do have those issues. We have
issues all around us.
We have health new diseases and new forms of chaos, of outbursts of chaos in our society. How do we react? How do we comprehend that? And that type of thinking is the one that the humanities concerns itself with.
We have immigration. We have all kinds of issues. So you're saying that each of these, the humanities and science, while looking at them differently, the humanities has a lot to say about each of these issues.
They make really important contributions both.
To understanding.
That's right. Medical sciences has told us how we can treat diseases. Medical science has not told us what is a fair distribution of health care. Medical science has not told us that and cannot tell us that. Those are questions that have to do with humans, with consensus, with the balance between resources and needs. Those are fundamentally political questions, and the humanities teaches us how to be political beings.
You're circling around another, I guess, a subtopic of this, and that is that those people who say we need to be in school to get skills and get a job, vocational training, what can the humanities offer a person who thinks that the only reason she or he is in college or in school is to get this vocational training? Should they have nothing to do with the humanities? They don't need them, stick to the curriculum. What could they get to be a better career? What could the humanities give them for their careers that might be valuable, if anything?
Anyone who thinks today that they can spend 2, 3, or 4 years learning a field and think that they're set for life with the amount of knowledge that they acquire is simply mistaken. We have longer lifespans, we have increasingly complex societies, we have economies that are transforming, so that everyone has to prepare themselves for 3 or 4 careers in their lives. And there is a set of skills having to do with your capacity to absorb new information, your capacity to make reasoned judgments, your capacity to evaluate ambiguous data, your capacity to transform yourself, to become and adapt, to become a new person and adapt to new circumstances. Those are skills that are necessary in any career. And those are skills that you take with you as a person. So there is a part of your education that's focused on the job that you will do. There's a part of your education that focuses on the person who you are. That part of the education focus on the person who you are is what the humanities contributes, and it's something that you take with you for your entire life, your entire set of careers.
And what values and ideas do I take with me to this vocation?
That's right.
Jim Carney had the opportunity to talk to two of my colleagues who have a grant that is exploring integrating the humanities into the curriculum. So let's take a look and see what they say.
Andrea Fabrizio and Gregory Marks are assistant professors at Hostos Community College. Recently, they completed a one-year program based on a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. We talked about the faculty development project at their South Bronx office. Let's start by putting things in context, like, for example, the definition of the humanities. How would you define the humanities to someone outside the education field?
Oftentimes, the humanities are opposed to the sciences, whereas the sciences kind of investigate those things which sort of pre-exist, sort of, rocks and minerals and chemicals and that sort of thing. The humanities are taken more as like cultural items, such as artifacts, paintings, literature, that sort of thing. Then that's how we set up and framed our discussion of the humanities, of our entire project, of what exactly the humanities are. So it's not just lay people, it's academics. We had to frame like what exactly are the humanities. What are we going to discuss?
That's one of the reasons we wanted to include science originally in our plan for the different lectures and the series of speakers we would have, because the sciences, like the arts and history and literature, does look at questions of what it means to be human.
Describe exactly what the program was that you developed for the grant.
Well, it was a one-year program. The NEH generously funded it for 1 year. It was just under $100,000, and this allowed us to bring 15 faculty from City University of New York. We really tried to focus on the community colleges. We brought in 15 faculty, both from Hostos and from the other 6 community colleges. And we got them here, and in October we had Roosevelt Montas and Mark Bauerlin from Emory University. We kind of framed it with a beginning seminar, and then we just got through in April with a kind of ending seminar, which really just sort of, at the beginning we wanted to frame what the big questions of the humanities are, and then ending with questions about capstone and first year experiences. And then in the interim we had 4 disciplinary questions. So we had somebody in history, philosophy, art, and literature.
What were the needs that you identified that came up with the concept for the program and for the grant?
The very first need I think that we were trying to address is that we often have students that need development in their reading and writing skills. And because of that, when you want to teach a whole text, a whole primary text like a novel or a philosophical text or anything, it becomes difficult. It's a challenge. How do you teach that in an effective way? How do you give the students the context they need to understand that? These are all challenges when you want to teach a humanities curriculum to students who are still developing the skills necessary to do that. So I think that was one of the very first things we were thinking of. And then we wanted to fit that into some of the broader things that were going on at the college, which was trying to unify the curriculum for our students in the form of first-year initiatives, getting students connected as soon as they come into the college, and then capstone courses, some sort of unifying thing at the end. So we really wanted a professional development initiative that would help faculty here at Hostos and from other CUNY campuses really think about using curriculum as a way to unify a student's experience and to help them feel more connected to their education.
And with students, unfortunately, who have so many deficits, both in reading and writing, and kind of historical gaps, as we all do, then it becomes a real important issue. And so that's one of the needs that we really saw.
What do you feel you were able to accomplish through the grant?
I think one of the major accomplishments of it was that we really got to bring together faculty from a lot of different disciplines. I mean, it was we advertised it as a humanities grant, but we didn't just have humanities faculty. So it was really interesting to see how somebody in criminal justice or in business is using the humanities, and that really kind of proved our point at the beginning that you don't just need the humanities if you're going into the humanities, they play into other things. So I think that was one of the strengths of it. And I think really reminding people of what they want students to do. I think that was a big accomplishment of the grant, to really create a space where faculty can talk to each other about what they're trying to do in their classrooms, new strategies they're trying out, goals they have for their students. It really opened up a really nice conversation, and having as a resource all these wonderful speakers that we brought in to share with us how they teach their material and to really model for us approaches for teaching difficult texts and important texts in the humanities was really something that I was happy that we took out of it.
Was there anything that surprised you through the process of this faculty development project?
I wouldn't say it surprised me, but the level of devotion and the kind of brightness and professionalism of the faculty, it didn't surprise me at all, but it struck me anew, just how, wow, my colleagues are really smart and devoted, and just their devotion to the students, both the very experienced faculty who've been here slogging away for 25 years, and the brand new faculty, just really devoted to the students. And that's what, and again, it's not a matter of surprise, but it's just very heartening to see.
And now back to Linda and her guest in the studio.
They gave an interesting discussion about how they are integrating the humanities into general education. And this, I think, brings us to the Columbia Core curriculum. Can you tell us a little bit about the Columbia Core curriculum, but starting with why a core curriculum? What is the purpose of a core curriculum?
The Columbia Core curriculum just turned 90. It started...
Happy birthday.
Thank you. It started in 1919 as a single course that everyone took. It was a course focused on war and peace issues. It was in the wake of the First World War. And the idea occurred to people in the faculty at Columbia that as the research colossus that Columbia is, and many other universities were beginning to be as well, as that research enterprise arose, what were the values and the essential education that we felt undergraduates ought to have? Aside from the changing specializations, aside from the new kinds of knowledge that we're throwing out all the time, is there a basic fundamental set of things, of mental habits, of dispositions, of approaches to learning and scholarship that we want to instill in our undergraduates? And so was this course born. A course that over that span has grown. It's now 5 courses that make up the Columbia Core curriculum. And it is core in a number of ways.
What are the values you want to instill via these courses?
The values are the values of the intellectual life, values that include flexibility, adaptability, skepticism, criticism, the capacity, which is the most difficult thing in education, the capacity to imagine how others view the world. That is the kind of fundamental work that the humanities do, and that the core curriculum tries to create an institutional curricular framework in which this can happen. It is a common experience. Every student takes these classes.
Listed as a criterion of wisdom, being able to see the world through somebody else's perspective and somebody else's eyes.
Yeah, and it is probably the most difficult thing that we as humans are able to do.
One of the issues about a core curriculum, and I know you've heard people disparagingly refer to them as dead white men. Students go to college and the only thing they read are things from Western culture written by white men.
Yeah.
Tell me how the Columbia Core has evolved and what kinds of courses students would be taking there now.
The Columbia program started as a course in the Western tradition, and it still remains largely a course in the Western tradition. But it's a fact of the world that a tradition that is an education that is simply focused on the Western tradition is not complete, is not adequate to the world in which we live. So Columbia has put a lot of effort into creating courses and a set of requirements that force people to go beyond the Western tradition and to look at different trajectories of learning, different trajectories of political, social, artistic thought that are not represented in the Western tradition. Now, the Western tradition, some of the central values that organize our society, idea of democracy, of human rights, of a scientific point of view, those are, as a matter of history, developments that were theorized, questions, established in the Western tradition. So the value of that tradition of learning and political development is inescapable.
Let's look at community college students. We know your Columbia students, of course, are coming with the abilities to read really well, to take the information. Can a curriculum like this work at a community college level? How would you envision it?
Every institution has a kind of ecosystem inside of which a program needs to live. So there is no one formula that works everywhere. The Columbia model, I think, it's incredibly powerful and transforms the lives of people. That model doesn't work everywhere, nor should it work everywhere. But everywhere, every curriculum should have, if our aim is education, every curriculum should pay systematic attention to the whole set of issues and the whole set of mechanisms of inquiry that are embodied in the humanities. All the more important, I think, in the case of community colleges. There is a tradition in this country, there's a tradition in much of the Western world that the humanities education is for the elite, and that has been pernicious and socially detrimental in profound ways, and we must not buy into that.
Even President Obama referred to the community colleges when he was emphasizing their value. He spoke about them as well as places for career building and did not speak to them as places for humanistic study.
Yeah.
And I think this point you raised, that will only a certain group of students be given the privilege of being able to study the humanities while other students are not really given that opportunity, that really sets, again, another gap.
Yeah.
That there will be some people who will be thinking and exploring these topics and other people who won't.
Yeah.
So you're saying that all students.
That's right. It is a mistake to think of professional education as excluding, as this being extraneous and a distraction from professional education. It's a real mistake. And it has to do with the fact that it's harder to count, it's harder to quantify the value of the humanities, for sure. It's hard to quantify
And everybody
the quality
wants
of
everything
human
quantified.
experience. That's right. But the most
As if
important
numbers are the
things,
truth.
That's right. But the most important things in our life are very hard, if not impossible, to quantify. How do you quantify the significance of of autonomy? How do you quantify the experience of love? How do you quantify the experience of brother or sisterhood? You cannot. But those are the fundamental values and the fundamental building blocks of what it means to be human, and we must not sacrifice attention to that in the interest of narrow, short-term pragmatics.
And these are some of the great questions that the humanities deals with.
Absolutely.
Before our time runs out, I want to ask you, I guess, the obvious question. In what ways do you think the humanities will be affected in this digital era, this world of computers? Is this going to change our connection to the humanities in any way?
It's certainly going to change what's there. It is going to change the methods, and it is going to change the subject of what we study. But there are certain things that, even though our technology has changed, we haven't changed in certain ways. There is something about human contact. There is something about enduring fundamental questions that
Even
keep
if we
up.
call it F2F, face to face, there is
That's
something
right.
to be said.
That's right.
Yes.
You know, Facebook and Twitter will create new things to study and new ways, new material for us to try to understand and grapple with. The basic thrust, the basic impulse, the basic methods in which we do that are embodied in the humanities, that's not going to go away as long as we're human.
And a 21st century person, our last question I believe we'll have time for, what do you think a student needs to know to be a humanistic person and function well in the complex world of the 21st century?
The capacity to continue to learn, the habit, the mental inclination to remain open and think of learning as a process. Think of knowledge not as an end goal, but as a habit, as a practice of living. That, I think, is the fundamental tool, the fundamental attitude that an educated person going forward needs to have.
And do you feel that we're giving that to our students today?
I think that the humanities is the best way to do that, and some places are doing a better job than others.
Enrollment in the humanities has been going down nationwide. Should we be paying attention to this? Should schools be investing money in the humanities? You know they are not. I mean, when we look at the data, schools are letting enrollment decline. Is that a mistake? And what could they do to reverse that? How can we convince today's students that it's worth their while
that is certainly,
to look in the humanities?
That is certainly a mistake, to underfund the humanities, to not fund the humanities. What can we do to help that? One of the things we can do is to continue to teach these courses and to find people for whom this education made all the difference in their life and bring them back into the classroom. Let them articulate for themselves what it has meant in their lives, even though they're an engineer or a business person or a lawyer. Let them articulate what it meant for them to have a humanistic education.
I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I thank you so much for joining us today. Dr. Roosevelt Montas, I really thank you so much. You've shed so much light on these issues.
My pleasure.
Please don't go away. We'll be right back with our Ed Bites.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have any suggestions or comments, drop us an email at our email address.
And now for this edition of Ed Bites.
EducationTechNews.com reports on a new study, etc., chatting with kids about being online, which tells parents how they can protect their children from online predators and cyberbullies. Advice includes talking to children by answering and asking questions and watching them when they're online. Keeping children's computers in common areas of the house, like living rooms, is also recommended.
The Wall Street Journal recently drew attention to the problem of teacher absences. According to the Journal, 1/5 of New York City teachers were absent for more than 2 weeks in the last school year. Absenteeism was highest in schools serving some of the poorest children. Though there are many possible explanations for why teachers were missing school, the end result for students is not good. Substitute teachers are no substitute for the real thing.
Not only should parents protect their kids online, but they should also prevent their kids from becoming what is termed tech zombies. Not surprisingly, kids take their cues from adults. So if you're attached to technology, there's a good chance your children are too. So is this bad? Specialists, including pediatricians, psychologists, and psychiatrists, say that too much time on screen impedes children's problem-solving skills, emotional growth, and physical fitness.
Hedge fund managers are the newest angels for New York State charter schools. In addition to dropping big bucks on the schools themselves, these executives are using their money to influence educational policy and lift the caps on charters by contributing vast sums to Albany lawmakers. With charter schools achieving mixed results, do these money men know more about managing schools than they did about managing money? I find this particularly irksome because we really don't know yet what makes charter schools successful. And if we did, then all of them would be successful. There are lots of public schools that need a lot of money as well.
Yeah.
This seems to be the attractive cause. So.
Well, at least the kids that graduate can say, I went to Robert Barron High. So. Well, that does it for this edition of EdCast.
School's out for the summer, so have a good one, and we'll see you in the fall.
EdCast is made possible in part by contributions from
Lesh and Lesh, your Bronx attorneys.